sorry. Oh, we're
Everyone,
going.
I think we're going to get started if you're here for the meeting. Sorry. Turn it off. Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the November meeting of the Portsmouth Conservation Commission. Before we get into the agenda and the approval of minutes, I wanted to take a second to acknowledge the resignation of Commissioner Allison Tanner, whose last meeting was the October meeting. And even though she's not here today, she might be watching, I don't know, I wanted to, on behalf of the Conservation Commission, thank her for her 30-plus years of service to the city of Portsmouth on the Conservation Commission. And I think I speak for all of us when I say her experience and her passion are going to be sorely missed on this board and hard to replace. And we wish her luck in her next chapter. With that being said, I think we do have one more commissioner who might be a couple minutes late, but we're going to get started anyways. The first thing on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I didn't see any edits. Did anyone else have any comments or edits? Would someone like to make a motion?
Do you need it? I'd like to make a motion to approve last week's minutes, even though I wasn't here, so I can't vote on it. Can I at least make the motion?
Right? Yeah. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second?
Sure.
That's smart.
Okay, so no, do you have any comments, Barbara? on that?
No, I didn't. It was good. Yeah.
Okay, so all in favor to approve the minutes from last month's meeting? And
And
Abby's
abstaining,
abstaining.
yeah.
Okay,
I did watch the meeting, though, on the
great.
video, so.
Next items on the agenda, we have a request to postpone for a wetland conditional use permit application for 90 FW Hartford Drive. Could I have a motion to postpone that?
I'll make a motion to postpone the 90 FW Hartford Drive to our December meeting. Is that correct that we're gonna, okay.
Next month, yep, perfect. I'll second.
Second, okay, all in favor? And same thing, we have another request to postpone a wetland conditional use permit application for 80 FW Hartford Drive. We have a motion?
I'll make a motion to postpone that until the December meeting.
Okay, 80 FW Hartford,
Yes.
second?
A second?
Somebody?
Adam
Okay.
Adam seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, new business. Our first item is 815 Lafayette Road, wetland conditional use permit. Is there someone here to speak to the application?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Neil Hansen with Tyne Bond. Also presenting on this project today will be Stephanie Titrolt as a wetland scientist with Tyne Bond. And Mike Brown, the owner and applicant, is also here if there are any questions that come up for him. So this project, I think everyone's familiar with it. We've had a site walk with the Conservation Commission, as well as we were here for a work session, I believe about a month ago. And then we also did meet with TAC yesterday for our first meeting with them. So the site is the old WHEB radio station on the plan here. Route 1 is on the left, and the main entrance to the site that we'll be reusing for this project. You can see the existing radio station building here in the center of the site, which includes parking in the front and this patio. All of that, or a significant portion of that, is within the 100-foot tidal wetland buffer, with that patio even encroaching into the 25-foot buffer. So this project will require a wetland conditional use permit for us to remove the building, parking, and other impervious surfaces from that 100-foot buffer. If you go to the next sheet, please. So the proposed site plan is very similar to the one that we had when we were here for work session. It's three 4-story residential buildings, 72 units total. First floor of each building is for parking and a small lobby area with 3 stories above that of residential units. And building 3 also has a small 1,200 square foot single story leasing office as an accessory to the residential use. As you can see from this plan, we've situated the entire project site so that all of the buildings, drive aisles, parking, and sidewalks are outside of the 100-foot tidal buffer. Within the tidal buffer is a wood chip path that will be a part of a greenway community space. This project is required to provide 10% community space on the lot in order to have more than one primary structure on the property. The property is rather large. It's just under 20 acres. About half of that, just under half of that, is all salt marsh, which is highly protected and undevelopable. But we still needed to include it in that community space area. So we do have a rather large community greenway, which is within that 100-foot buffer. And I think Stephanie will speak more to our plans for that area during her part of the presentation. And the development area of this is only 4.3 acres of that 19.6 acre lot. If you go to the next page, please. So this was a impervious surface exhibit that we had included in your package. And this just shows the existing impervious surfaces that are within that 100-foot buffer on the top, and then on the bottom is the proposed site plan, which is showing that all of the impervious surfaces are being pulled out of that buffer. If you go to the next sheet. Just quickly wanted to touch on stormwater for the site. So right now there's no stormwater treatment practices on this site. So the proposed development will be collecting all the stormwater runoff from the roofs, drive aisles, parking areas. There's a long 36-inch detention system along the back of the buildings here, which will then discharge through a stormwater filtration unit prior to discharging. And we are looking to share the existing discharge point that the NHDOT uses for the roadway runoff, so we're not creating a new discharge location into the creek. If you go to the next sheet. So this is where I'll pass it over to Stephanie, and she'll go through the plantings and invasives.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephanie Tetralt. I'm with Ty and Bond as well. Wetland scientist. I did go out here a month ago in early October to do an inventory of the invasive species or just the vegetative community overall. This plan that you have here in front of you is in your packet, is a course inventory of the vegetative community, highlighting the invasive species that are in there. I generally inspected the site and assessed it from west to east, so left to right as the page, as we look at it. I broke out the areas into six separate areas and a seventh small point, which are distinguished from each other by different stratas of vegetation, different types of vegetative community, and species composition. So starting from the left-hand side, this area 1 here, area 2, area 3 along the shoreline, 4, 5, and 6 goes around the corner. The predominant species across the whole site is certainly autumn olive. Intermixed in that is some glossy buckthorn, common buckthorn. In the forested area, or the portion that has a more significant tree canopy, we do have some native species in there. The predominant tree species is black locust. There's northern red oak, some maples, gray birches. Down closer to the shoreline for native species, there's a few bayberry, there's beach plum, also some birches and some grasses and flowering plants too, more closely to the shoreline there. Area 3 was distinguished based on its actually more of a shrub classification, and the tree line there exists right about where that dashed line is, where the cursor is coming over. That's the 50-foot buffer from the highest observable tide line. So just for reference there, there's a shrub community in front and forested in the back, just about plus or minus that 50-foot buffer line. So moving from west to east, the west portion of the site is definitely most highly infested and invaded with invasive species. The density there of the invasives is far greater than it is on the eastern portion of the site. I think that's because on the eastern portion, there's a much more mature, forested, thicker canopy structure in that part of the vegetative community. So there's a more shaded understory, less ability for those invasives to really go crazy in the understory. They are still present there. There's buckthorn scattered throughout. Mostly bittersweet, though, is climbing up the birches and some of the black locusts that are over there too. Autumn olive, again, persists throughout the whole thing. And if you go to the next slide, I have a series of photos that kind of highlight in order from left to right. So this photo here is pretty characteristic of areas 1, 2, and 3, that whole leftern, westernmost portion. In the foreground, that's area 3, as we've described it. You can see there's autumn olive, there's oriental bittersweet kind of climbing through there, younger, smaller strands of it. Mostly honeysuckle, though, which is very dense, forms a very thick, kind of low canopy structure, but it leaves the actual ground surface bare and doesn't allow for any of the herbaceous, finer root structure to form there. So that's one of the challenges with this level of invasive species is it destabilizes, or it offers the potential to destabilize the soil. You're not getting that root structure that holds it together over time. It's just bare ground. Also, it's too thick for wildlife habitat. It diminishes the wildlife habitat after a certain point. Critters really can't get through there. You should have seen me trying to get through there. And then as you move into the photo, that is area 2 in the background. The tree line, right where you see it there, is all bittersweet. You can kind of see that yellow foliage, that brighter yellowish green foliage. That's all actually oriental bittersweet kind of climbing up from this foreground, starting to really blanket that tree line, those black locust trees in the background. So if you go to the next photo, this is taken from more or less the same spot, a little bit further to the east, but facing in a southerly direction towards the salt marsh. So it's a hard photo to digest, but that was kind of my point, is that it was just so thickly overrun and dense with that honeysuckle and autumn olive, a little bit of buckthorn, multiflora rose is scattered through there as well. There are in this area a fair mix of like asters, solidago, goldenrod, some other native flowering plants, but they're being outcompeted by mainly the honeysuckle and the autumn olive in this area. So next slide. This is characteristic of area 4, moving further towards the east. This is kind of near that patio where the building is within the 25 or 50 foot buffer. And those tree trunks that you see in the foreground are a stand of staghorn sumac. You can see the bittersweet, again, is just starting to kind of tangle around the staghorn sumac. And then I wanted to point out in this photo that you can see the Phragmites in the salt marsh in the background. This is a good kind of vantage that shows that edge of the drop-off you might have noticed on one of the grading plans. It drops off pretty steeply right there. So that Phragmites in the background is 6 or 7 feet tall, and I'm sort of eye level with it from this vantage. So next photo. Continuing again, I only have a couple more photos to go through, but continuing again in the easterly direction, this is taken from the salt marsh looking back towards the site, just down from that staghorn sumac stand. And it's an example of, it's bayberry. There's a couple clusters throughout of bayberry and beach plum, as I mentioned, native shrubs that we would make an effort to retain in this effort. In the invasive species removal effort and the buffer enhancement plan. It's wildly overrun with invasives, but there are some select healthy native individuals that could be retained and should be. The next photo shows another tree that I would hope to retain also, that big white pine in the background. It's sitting right on that slope. It's stabilizing that steep bank, and it seems to offer some potential wildlife habitat and refuge just because of the way it's its form there. It's a nice pine tree. Next to that, though, in the foreground is the just the continuation of the autumn olive persisting down the shoreline. Salt marsh is to the right of the page. Next photo, last two photos. This is taken right off that corner of the landform as it turns to the north. Black locust, you're starting to see that character of that portion, that area 6, that is less heavily invaded with the invasive species and has much more room in the understory to pursue a reasonable removal effort. And then the next photo, I think there's just 2 more. So this, as well as the final one, if you want to just skip ahead to that, is highlighting the bittersweet infestation that's in this area. That's the predominant invasive that's in all of Area 6. Like I said, there's a couple buckthorn scattered throughout, some honeysuckle, some autumn olive still, but bittersweet is the predominant species that's overrunning in that forested area. So I know you've all been on the site. If you have any questions at this point, if you want to switch to the next slide, that was my recap of the existing conditions, and then I'll start to get into what our proposed management plan will be. So Neil just had this slide up a few minutes ago, but I wanted to include it in this portion of the presentation because I think it's a good snapshot that highlights what we are doing to enhance the buffer. So it also shows the existing and proposed tree line to give you a relative orientation to where the buffer exists today in its entirety and how we're proposing to enhance it under this project, as well as the amount of buildings and impervious surfaces that are existing in the buffer today, which are all, this whole area will be part of our invasive species and tidal buffer management plan. And the final slide, if you will. This is the invasive species management plan. It highlights this gray area, the gray shaded portion that extends, starting on this left-hand side of the screen and then also all the way through to this area 6 or so as I've described it. In that portion of the site, the goal is to mechanically remove the invasive species, doing it by hand. Rather labor intensive, but we understand there are some concerns and perceived risks with chemical treatments. So mechanical has been decided as the way to go for this effort. There are quite a few species out there, as I've described, but the intent is to use, let me back up. First, before going out there, we will do a more detailed inventory of each individual species. That effort will be combined with the need to demonstrate compliance with the minimum shoreland vegetation maintenance standards. So each tree is going to be identified, measured, and flagged for retaining to leave on site or to be removed if it's an invasive or a non-viable native tree, like those that were just sort of smothered or already dead from being overcome with bittersweet. So each area and each tree to be removed will be identified in the field. After that, we'll get on site with weed wrenches, mini excavators. If we can't reach it with the mini excavator, we've described, this is all in your packet as well, using like come-alongs, straps and come-alongs to get at the individual trees and shrubs that we want to get to. If it's a smaller tree or shrub, all that honeysuckle that's in the front area down in this portion, those will be removed. The goal is to take them up as one mass, the above ground material as well as the root ball, by using the mini excavator and the weed wrench, just digging them up, shaking them out, and pulling the whole plant back off inland to be stockpiled and then disposed of. If they are larger trees, larger diameter or otherwise inaccessible, they will be cut flush with the ground with the chainsaw or other removal equipment, and then the stumps will be ground down deep. That's the approved or preferred method for some of the larger trees anyways, just based on their rooting structure and the feasibility of pulling out the entire root mass. So that is the goal within the entire gray area. And then towards the center of the site, where the majority of that existing building and patio and impervious parking area will be removed, is an intensive planting plan. This is all among that wood chip pathway as well. So the planting plan in that area consists of a variety of shrubs, trees, flowering plants. These are bucket plantings, not just seed mix, and they'll be interspersed throughout there in this whole general area. In the background, it might be tricky to see from here, but there's each individual plant proposed to be planted or areas are identified, but then there's a seed mix underlying that, this sort of right-left diagonal shading. So this seed mix in the seaward side of the path is going to be a riparian mix consisting of more flowering species, some shrubs, and like pollinator species, milkweed, asters, goldenrod, similar structure that's out there as the native community. The seed mix on the back will be a mix of like a fescue mix, a grass mix, a low-mow grass mix, which also has some habitat and wildlife benefits as well. That is the proposed management plan. I'm looking forward to hearing any of your questions or getting some feedback to help us refine the plan.
Do you have more to the presentation, or should we
No.
stop here?
Got a
And
little bit more. Are you done?
Yeah, the only thing I didn't touch on is monitoring, but that is part of the proposal. Part of the effort, we would monitor the project as it's being done, the removal, and then for growing season or two after that. So, no, go ahead.
So I just had a couple more things, and be happy to take any questions. So one thing that I forgot to mention earlier that we did want to highlight as a significant benefit of this project is the current building is managed by a septic system. That will be removed as part of this project, and this site will be put into the municipal sewer system. So that we see that as a rather large benefit to the Sagamore Creek. And the last thing I just wanted to touch on quickly and run through are the approval criteria for the wetland conditional use permit. I'm just going to try and get through these quickly. The land is reasonably suited to the use, activity, or alteration. The land is a currently previously disturbed site that consists of the former WHEB radio station. The proposed project design is an allowed use within the Gateway Neighborhood Mixed-Use District. The proposed project site consists of previously disturbed tidal buffer areas, which have historically been used as a commercial site. The proposed project will result in impervious surface reduction in the buffer enhancement, and will provide public access in the upland area along Sagamore Creek. 2, there's no alternative location outside the wetland buffer that is feasible and reasonable for the proposed use, activity, or alteration. As I've discussed in my presentation, the placement of the proposed buildings and parking areas was done in a manner to remove all impervious surfaces within the 25, 50, and 100-foot tidal buffers, and proposes to replace existing impervious surfaces with native grass mix and native plant, trees, and shrubs. 3, there will be no adverse impacts on the wetland functional values of the site or surrounding properties. There will be no adverse impact to the wetland functional values of the site, as the existing condition is previously disturbed and consists of buildings, parking area, concrete paths, and sidewalks. The proposed project intends to remove all of the impervious surfaces from the wetland buffer area. The remainder of the buffer will be enhanced by the removal of invasive species and enhance the existing vegetation with native vegetation. The proposed project design site and landscape plans enhance the previously disturbed tidal buffer area given the existing condition and provide added value by creating public open space for recreation along the upland bank of Sagamore Creek. 4, the alteration of the natural vegetative state or managed woodland will occur only to the extent necessary to achieve construction goals. The proposed project design proposes minimal alteration to the natural woodland to the greatest extent practical. This alteration includes the removal of invasive species and the construction of a wood chip greenway community trail. The construction of the wood chip trail is intended to minimize disturbance of natural vegetative state by field alignment of the proposed trail around existing large native trees. The proposal is the alternative with the least adverse impact to areas and environments under the jurisdiction of this section. The proposed project design does not have an adverse impact on the site, as it would enhance the buffer by improving water quality through stormwater treatment and providing public access to the upland bank of the Sagamore Creek. Impervious surfaces within the 25, 50-foot, and 100-foot tidal buffers have been removed by eliminating buildings, parking, sidewalks, patios, and concrete pads. And as I just previously mentioned, also removing the septic system. And 6, the area within the vegetated buffer strip will be returned to a natural state to the extent feasible. And the proposed project design within the vegetated buffer strip is limited to the removal of impervious areas and selective invasive species removal. The landscape plan proposes replacing the existing disturbed areas within the 25-foot wetland buffer with native grass mix mown as required to avoid incursions of invasive species, and the addition of several native trees and shrubs on the water side of the wood chip path. That is all I have for our presentation. Anything else? So we'd be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Who wants to start? Go.
To clarify, and I can't remember, we may have discussed this before, but with the parking areas and everything, there wasn't really an opportunity to make those pervious at all? I forget what the,
Yeah, so the
Soil
ledge
is-
on this site's really high, so doing that sort of treatment technology isn't really practical. To do something in a high ledge area like that, you'd have to under drain it, and when you put an under drain and pervious pavement, you no longer meet the city's requirements for nitrogen removal.
so it's sort of the same thing, but there wasn't really anywhere to detain the water.
Correct. Yeah, we did get a comment yesterday from TAC about looking into potentially converting the detention system to an infiltration system. We'll have to do some field testing to see if that's feasible. The project works from a stormwater perspective without it, but the thought is if we can do it, it'd be an added benefit. So we will be looking into that and adding that if possible.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The parking garage on the first floor of each of the buildings, in your elevation drawings, you know, where you've got the actual illustration with color, I don't see is the west end, does the west elevation show, is that big wide brown thing in the gray, is that, the parking garage entrance? I don't see it from the other.
Kate, do you have the full plan?
Sorry, it froze as soon as I opened it.
It's in the color photographs,
Wait a
sort of
second.
fake photographs,
I'll go through here.
not drawings.
What page are you on,
It
Abby?
might take me a second.
I'm on this.
Do you have like a, if you scroll down?
It's
to the title
page 37 in the,
Packet?
yeah, in the packet. After going to the,
Is it after the invasive plan?
and so I'm just wondering where the car's going in and out are they in this, is each building identical too, so that,
Yeah, so the buildings are identical. They're, depending on where the driveways are, they may be entering
That's-
from one
yeah.
side or the other.
so where they, I don't understand, I see the entrance, for the people, but I don't see how the cars are getting in, and
I
does
believe
that?
that would be a
Yeah,
garage
okay, that's what
door.
I was talking about.
If
so
you-
the-
If you can go back to the site plan now.
So the west end of each building is going to have that,
So it varies. So building 1 and building 2, the garage entrances face each
okay,
other.
across from each other, okay.
And then building 3 is on the back. So building 3 and building 1, the garage entrances are on the east.
Okay.
Building 2, it's on the west.
Right, so, okay, that leads me to the real question I had, which was, it looks like the garage is completely closed. In other words, you go in and no outside light is getting out during the night, correct? From the
I'm not
parking
entirely
garage?
sure. I'm not the one that's designing the building.
What?
I'm not the one that's designing the building, so I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. Is there something
And
you can
I-
answer as to whether
I also
it's-
don't think the building's been fully
enclosed?
designed at this point. I'm guessing it will be open air ventilation. Otherwise, you need mechanical ventilation.
Much like most garages are, yeah?
Oh, it's closed. I'm being told it's closed.
It's close.
It's what?
It will be closed.
It will be closed, okay. right, that was my only question, so.
I had a couple questions about the trail, as much as you know about it. I didn't see there a width for it. Has a width been decided upon?
So the trail shown on the plan is 8 feet.
8 feet?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is the intent. And as Stephanie mentioned, we will be going out and locating native trees that we were intending on saving, and then we'll be determining the final alignment of the trail to avoid having to remove any additional trees.
Is there a reason for 8 feet? I mean, I think we would probably appreciate if it was less, 5 feet, if it has to be, you know, maybe ADA compliant, which we don't know, but
Yeah,
8 feet seems,
I think 8
excessive.
is just what we've typically done for a sort of a path of this type. I think the idea is it's, by having it be wood chip, it's a minimally invasive path. And, you know, walking trails aren't allowed use within the wetland buffer.
definitely, it just makes it harder to kind of snake around trees we're trying to preserve it, the wider the trail is.
Yeah, I think
for
if
sure.
it came down to having, you know, narrowing it down in a certain location or cutting down a, you know, 12-inch maple tree, we'd go with the narrower path in those areas. I think generally we'd like to keep it at the 8-foot width. But yeah, to your point, if there's any instances where it's between 8 feet and a big native tree, I think the tree's gonna win that one.
Okay. We had also talked at the work session about potentially doing like a split rail fence along the wetlands side of the trail to try to protect that area. And
Yep.
I didn't see that on the plan. I didn't know what had become of that
I think we
discussion.
are open to that.
Okay.
So we would be willing to add that to the plans if that's
Okay.
the wish of this
Okay.
board.
There was a discussion of these gardens being a community space and of providing some kind of access from the major car park behind it. I missed that in this proposal.
So we didn't include any access to that adjacent property in this proposal. We've actually put plantings along that property line as a screening between the two. I believe the owners of this property are open to working with the abutter in the future, but it's not part of this proposal.
Okay, so it's called community space, but it's only called community space because it's not really for the community in that sense.
Well, there's access from Route 1. We do have a surplus of parking spaces, so if anyone wishes to drive to the site, there are additional parking spaces that they can use. And we also got a comment from TAC about adding some exterior bike racks for anyone who may ride their bike to the site and want to walk the trail.
And I really appreciate the planting plan and the management of the invasive species. On the planting plan, and more specifically the management after that, what is it supposed to look like? Is it supposed to be a perfect lawn, or are you going to let the natives grow into brushes, bushes, and something less managed and more truthful to what the native environment should be?
Yeah,
Or
so
was.
it's mostly the latter of that. So the areas on this plan that have the different hatch patterns, so Stephanie was talking about the different
Seed mixes.
seed mixes that
Yeah.
we're going to be using those two areas. So those areas will be left in a more natural state with much more infrequent mowing. The areas outside the 100-foot buffer up adjacent to the building in this rear sidewalk would be managed as more of a lawn area. But the majority of the site will be left in a more natural state, and everything within that 100-foot buffer will be left in a natural state.
Thank you.
Follow-up question? So as follow-up to that, in your maintenance plan, it did say that that area, my understanding was those areas that are going to be more natural would be mulched every year. Does that make sense? Said
That was in the, where did you read that?
Say that again, sorry.
Sorry, where did you find that? I don't believe that was described in the portion, the restoration portion. It's certainly
For
something that.
maintenance. So I can try to figure it out, because mine kept freezing up, so I don't know where it is.
Mine's frozen too.
I think maintenance was page 102 in the packet, which is like a long way away.
I have a quick question while you're trying to find that, Barbara. The buffer seed mix 1, which is, looks like what's being used on the wetland side of the path, is that something that has to be mowed?
No,
No, so that'll be left completely alone.
correct.
Yes.
And it's just the, I guess, buffer seed mix 2, which is on the building side, that will, is that fescue that you're saying has some mowing, right?
Yes. Maybe annual mowing. It's intended to be allowed to grow slightly tall, through,
Yeah.
grow a season, and then perhaps an annual mowing event.
Okay, I just, yeah. Did you find what you're looking for yet?
No, I found some stuff, but I didn't find what I was
I
looking
think
for.
I found it. The landscaped, maintained as required and mulched each spring.
So that section is intended for the parking areas, not for the restoration areas. So we can make that clear.
Clarify that maybe,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the restoration and buffer areas have their own maintenance requirements and that is for the general sites of the parking lot.
So there won't
Yeah,
be,
we can definitely clarify that.
so there won't be mulching down below other than to keep invasives down. So I have a bunch of questions about the trail, and, oh, now I don't have my spot anymore, but the staff report had indicated that the 25-foot vegetated buffer is already protected, so that the definition of community space, that's not, that trail really isn't included in it?
So, yeah, so we had this same comment for our TAC meeting yesterday, so we're gonna set up a meeting with the planning staff and come to a resolution on what we can and cannot include in our calculation. The project needs to meet 10% for other zoning reasons. So we'll figure out a way to get to that 10%. The trail itself is not within the 25-foot buffer, so that's not part of that area to begin with.
Okay, so my other questions on the trail is not knowing exactly where that trail goes, and by exactly, I think I brought this up at the last time we talked about this, that it's just kind of a straight line going across, but what you define is something that's meandering in and out through the basic native species that you're going to leave. So not knowing where that is leaves an awful lot of flexibility and unknowns on our part to what's going to happen next when whoever goes in there to do the work is going to do it, and they're going to do it, they're going to make those calls. I feel like this is something the same as knowing where a road would go or a sidewalk would go, that we would want to know where it is going ahead of time before we approve this, because it's a pretty big unknown and it's a pretty delicate area. And in addition to that, bringing in mulch to do the path, I think there was something that I found that said it would be 2 inches or 3 inches of mulch.
Wood chips.
Wood chips, sorry, mulch, wood chips. So not having a good, almost a cross-section of how that's going to look. Is there going to be, are you going to need to cut out roots? Are you going to need to do any fill? Any of those details?
I think the idea would be to just lay the wood chips down on the existing surface, so we're not going to be cutting out any material and bringing any additional fill in other than the wood chips. And again, as Stephanie mentioned too, she's going to be going out and locating trees, and I think that'll be occurring pretty soon. So we will have a defined idea of where the trail is going. The idea would be to have that on the plans before they go to planning board.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
With the trail, where you show it right now,
you show it kind of staying within that, outside of the 50-foot buffer area. Would it be kind of generally acceptable to say it will stay, 50 feet or greater from the shoreline there?
Yeah, we intentionally drew it
So
outside
if
the
it
50
meanders, it will meander kind of
It
closer
will
to the
meander
buildings?
between the 50 and the 100, yes.
Yep.
I just had a few questions regarding the invasives. So my first one is, did you guys have a rough estimate of the percent of invasives within the buffer in total?
In total, overall, I mean, I'd estimate greater than 75% invasives in terms of coverage and species composition.
In the 100-foot buffer or in the, what's the?
Well, within the existing tree line along the frontage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as I described too, it decreases from west to east. So the western portion is greater than 80%. It's almost entirely autumn olive, multiflora, buckthorn, bittersweet, with the exception of a few of the trees in the canopy area on the north side in that area too. On the eastern side, it may be maybe less than 50% in terms of coverage, considering there's a solid mature canopy in that area, and then the invasives are like shrubs and smaller trees and shrubs and woody vines that are climbing through there.
Okay, thank you. And just to sort of follow up on the plan for removal of all the invasives, I was first wondering if there's going to be some extra erosion control measures put in place when you're bringing in like the excavator, the mini excavator to rip out the root systems, things like that. Will that sort of, I think it would be really beneficial to have erosion control measures between the salt marsh and where you're removing the invasives, and maybe, I know there will be more for the construction outside of the buffer, but maybe at that 100-foot line? I don't know what the plans were for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We can add that to the plan, that level of detail, but I can envision using a silt sock, some type of a perimeter control on the salt marsh side of the limits of the removal effort. And then within that, where I described if we had to use a mini excavator to get access to a larger tree or shrub species, we would use timber matting or an equivalent measure to prevent compaction and rutting of just accessing that area.
Okay, great.
And the removal, pulling out the root balls, that's expected to generate some sediment too, so we would just use best practices in those areas and contain the perimeter.
Sorry, I got a few more follow-ups just about the invasives. For removing those, do you expect that to sort of keep them away for a few years? What's sort of the long-term invasive plan, if there is one, or?
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, and there is, it's understood that regeneration, disturbing them alone may cause some amount of regeneration. So monitoring is essential. Monitoring during the work while they're out there, pulling them out, not just pulling out that one honeysuckle and dumping it away, but making sure that any propagules and pieces didn't get left behind. So after the coarse removal effort is completed, then we'll do a sweep of the area and collect all of the bits and pieces that might have dropped off. So that's like the initial monitoring effort. And then depending on the time of year when the work is done, if we're there in the beginning of the growing season, we would definitely be visiting the site frequently through the growing season to pick up any little propagules that might emerge after that. Same thing with the following growing season.
Okay, I think that might be something, maybe the monitoring report submitted to city staff might be something that we're interested in seeing for at least the invasive removal process, but maybe also the follow-up with the plantings in that area for maybe the time of planting and a couple months after or a season after might be something we're looking for.
Sure.
Just kind of like build on that a little bit too. I mean, I do get a little bit nervous, right? This is, a prime wetland that you're adjacent to, right? A really sensitive, really kind of rare habitat type that's right there adjacent to this area. So removing 75% of the plant matter in that buffer area feels like a pretty serious undertaking. And it is going to take, years to get rid of those invasive species. And I guess I wonder if there's any way to kind of prioritize your effort there. And just, I see you've included a lot of guidance from UNH and from Extension about it, but I guess I would say that removing invasives in the buffer area specifically, oftentimes there's different guidance. Like, so it's, at least the guidance that I've seen is not necessarily to remove the root matter, but just to kind of cut at the surface. You can leave the roots in place to like at least stabilize it and then just come back year after year if you've decided that that's like a priority to remove that invasive species. And I guess I just wonder if there's any thought given there, if you did have to prioritize, how you would prioritize, or, in I guess how many years are you committed to doing this if you are going to go through the invasive process of, this big disturbance? Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
I think priority-wise, the honeysuckle, that shrubbier, thicker area, and the bittersweet also, because it's just so detrimental to the habitat. The autumn olive, it's voracious and weedy, but it's not as like aggressive, taking over the other species there. So, but if you leave one or some, they just regenerate themselves. So exposing some disturbed area next to that is just going to be an opportunity for the regeneration of different species. So there could be some selective measure there, and like risking not pulling out everything or all 75% or so. There's also room in our plan to allow for buffer enhancement, I think, in that the gray shaded area that I was describing, where mulching could be an opportunity, or just other things so that we wouldn't leave a bunch of bare soil in that area. If we had to bring in some seed mix or some plantings in that area to make sure that it's stabilized for those buffer, to keep an intact riparian buffer, then that would be necessary. I think there's an adaptive process there too. Once we get out there and actually identify each individual that's going to be removed, we're going to have to be on our toes and monitoring it long-term to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah. And who would do that? Who would do that long-term maintenance? And what would that look like? Is it a 2-year commitment that you or the collective you, I guess right? I mean, you typically, right, just walk away from a project like this once it's, everything is filled, the residents are there and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we've specifically determined the time period. But I think when you get into this sort of work, I think, multi-year monitoring is kind of a given. And, I think it's been mentioned that if we come in, we clear this stuff out and then leave, a year or two later, it's going to look exactly like it does now. So there is going to need to be a longer term process to make sure we're not doing all this work for no reason.
Right.
In our plan, as it's been written, it's committing to at least the following growing season.
Okay, so 2 years, basically. Okay. And I guess maybe this sort of relates, but I actually don't know are these condos, or are they going to be rented? Is it a single owner kind of situation where their management
Yes.
is a tiny bit easier?
Yeah.
Okay. So it'll be rentals,
Correct.
is the idea? Okay.
Yes. I just want to real quick jump back onto the alignment of the trail, because this did come up at TAC, and they had asked us to put a note on the plan, which we've agreed to, and that note will read that the final alignment of the trail is subject to review and approval by the Planning and Sustainability Director, and that any subsequent modification will be subject to the Planning Board approval as a site plan amendment. So that note will be added to the plans at the request of TAC.
I have some maintenance plan questions. This one is on page 102. I had a question about the pavement sweeping being annually. And I'm wondering what time of year that would be, if you're applying salt or sand at all on the pavement.
We can specify. I think, generally that would be in the spring after the winter season. I think we've also on a couple other, so I think spring is generally the time that would be done. But if there's a specific time you had in mind, we can revise that to be more specific.
Yeah, like in April.
Okay.
Yeah, March or April. And then my other question on that is on page 117. I think it's the salt storage. So it indicates for salt storage in here. I think that's it. Oh, that's the de-icing. Where's the salt storage one?
I don't think, we don't intend to have any exterior salt storage at the
Okay.
site. So if there's anything in there related to that, it was included in there and we can remove that.
Okay, so you won't have, there won't be salt stored on site?
There may, but it will not be outside.
Okay. Could you like put that in the plan, that any salt storage would be undercover? Because it,
I think we can remove the "or located" part of that sentence there. It's just say salt storage areas shall be covered.
yeah. Yeah, because you're just saying it needs to be covered if it's not going to drain to a water body and
Yes.
eventually, and that sort of doesn't help any of the vegetation in the area that's going to get killed by salt if they don't cover it.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I think that was it on that section.
I have a couple things that I haven't mentioned yet, or I guess have been touched upon, but I just wanted to get a confirmation. How many surplus parking spots do you have?
We have 12 extra.
12,
There's
okay.
121 total, and there's 109 required.
And I'm assuming only residents can park underneath
Yes.
buildings. Okay, so hopefully those 12, or at least most of them, would be available outside.
Yes. And there is also 4 EV spaces on the site.
Okay. One other, the riprap outfall, did you say you're using the same one that DOT is using?
Yeah, so well, it's a different outfall, but it's the same area. So it's on the bottom left of right there. So the area on the left is the existing riprap outlet.
Yeah.
This is our proposed one, and that whole swale. So there's a swale that runs from the DOT pipe out to basically the highest observable tide line, and I believe that is all currently overgrown riprap within a DOT easement.
Okay.
So they have the ability to go in there and clean that out and put new riprap down if they want.
And so you're connecting kind of into that as it goes through the buffers?
Yeah. So our outlet is outside, so our outlet is right here.
Yeah.
This is the 50-foot buffer line.
So you won't have to do any maintenance into that 50-foot buffer?
Correct.
All your maintenance is up?
All of
where your
our maintenance would be within the 50 to 100-foot buffer for that outlet.
Okay.
We won't have to go into below the 50-foot to do any of that stormwater connection.
Okay. And then my last question goes back to plantings one more time. The area kind of around where you have kind of that overlook, extra loop
Yep.
coming down, you've got, proposed planting bed, perennial, proposed ornamental grasses. And are those going to be like more manicured? Like are you're going to have a crew come in however so frequently to kind of maintain that area? Or is that kind of just planted and left to its own?
We want the buffer areas to look as native and natural as possible.
Yeah.
So the intent is not to have a manicured landscaped area along
Yeah.
that trail.
So, I mean, I guess what I would say is kind of anything wetland side of the trail, like, we would want no maintenance, just like plant and kind of let it just kind of do its thing.
Okay.
Because, the more
Yeah.
people in there is
Right.
just the more opportunities for something to,
Want a natural.
yeah. And then building side is a much better area to kind of maybe have more of that slightly more manicured look, if you like, with the ornamental grasses, for example.
Yeah, and so what doesn't come through particularly on this sheet is that kind of where that line is between what I would call the, lawn area and the natural seated area
Yeah.
is actually the top of the slope. So there's a level area along the back of the buildings where that sidewalk is, and then it slopes down to where the path is.
Yeah.
So that sloped area will be the natural seated area. And so there's going to be that natural definition there where it goes from flat to sloped, where the sort of end of the sort of more maintained landscape area is.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if we could add a note about that so that the sloped area gets low maintenance and the area underneath the path gets little or no maintenance so that it really grows and thrives, that would be great.
Okay. I'm not sure if we may already have something to that effect on here, but if not, we'd be happy to add that.
Go ahead, Glenn.
So oftentimes we ask about lighting as well. I don't think we've talked about that yet. Are you planning to light this path? Or, I guess there's the wood chip path or the cement path.
No, so yes, I did not cover that,
Okay.
but all of the lighting proposed for this project is building mounted, and the majority of it faces the parking area, and then there's some smaller lighting between the buildings, but nothing on the rear of the buildings, and the trail is not lit.
Okay, cool. And you know that's a priority for us too.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. And I can leave. You go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to kind of go back to just sort of the intensiveness of the use of this property, and I guess I just want to just like make it clear that like it's a little bit of a. I totally agree that you could argue that there's kind of a net benefit here, right? That you're removing a lot of impervious, removing the septic system, which is fantastic, but this is a really intensive use of that shoreline area. I would say more intensive than the WHEB was. So I guess I just sort of feel like acknowledging that, right? That you are kind of stewards of this, like this piece of land that's in a, right adjacent to a really sensitive habitat. And I guess I would, in terms of like this community space, I would argue that it feels very awkward to me or sort of unfair to consider this buffer area community space and maybe draw the line at like the 50-foot, but like anything below the 50-foot, it feels like inappropriate to call that community space, especially if we're going to go with this guideline of like that the trail can't cross it, the maintenance, the landscaping can't cross that 50-foot line. I don't know. That's what I would feel most comfortable with. Again, just recognizing that this is there's going to be a lot of people and a lot of traffic in this area. And we need that housing. We know that that's an important use too, but just acknowledging that, right? Yeah. Just wanted to make that point.
And you guys could straighten me out on this if they've already, because it did freeze up on me so much that clarifying the difference between permanent impacts and temporary impacts do you want to talk about that for a second, or have you already covered that?
In what regard?
To,
So there's nothing that speaks to temporary and permanent impacts in the city's regulations.
so do we know what the temporary impacts will be on this property?
We don't need a state wetland application, so we haven't calculated the difference between temporary and permanent.
Okay, and you don't need that for a shoreline one?
Shoreline would be, it would be different. We haven't prepared that application yet, though.
Right. Okay. Sounds good.
Will you need a shoreland permit?
Yes.
You will,
Will.
okay.
Yeah, they do.
One more thing.
Yes.
It'll hopefully be quick. Just going back to sort of maintenance, I'm thinking more and more, since it'll be community space, and usually I'm assuming community space that's given by developers is usually maintained by the property owners, but since this is going to be a wetland buffer area, conservation area, I'm wondering if we want more input in the long-term maintenance, or if we want some sort of agreement that the city is to do the long-term maintenance based on Conservation Commission recommendations, if that's maybe an agreement that staff can come to at some point, but I don't know how we want that long-term maintenance to be handled, either by us or put in a note somewhere.
Do you mean specifically the trail or like the entire community space?
I would think, well, I'm thinking everything's with the trail and south of the trail, but I would think it would probably be our responsibility to maintain the trail and,
Like when it needs more wood chips?
right, and like long-term
I got a
invasive
question.
removal.
Or at least the monitoring of it. I mean, I wonder if that would be like just a yearly check-in, just like you do with a kind of a conservation easement, right? Checking to see that the use is consistent with the fact that this is a jurisdictional buffer area.
And maybe if something needs a bit more, like invasive removal or plantings need to be replaced 10 years down the line, that might be something that the city can help out with in some regards. Maybe we can set up some sort of agreement that way.
Go ahead, Abby.
I have a question. What is the building cost of this project, and what are the rents that you annually intend to bring in from these rents? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea.
Does anybody back there have any ideas? I'm guessing this didn't get built just without a huge
We haven't,
economic.
We haven't looked in detail at the cost, but I'm not sure how it's relevant to the application. We're talking about the jurisdictional 100-foot buffer.
I'm sorry, what?
We're talking about the jurisdictional 100-foot buffer. I don't know what the rents are relative to that application, the conditional use
Okay.
permit application.
All right.
I mean, I think it's fair for us to be thinking about ecological and social kind of considerations here, right? I mean, I think we're acknowledging that there's an impact here, but there also has some social benefit. So I guess I would argue that that's a legit question, personally. But it sounds like there's no expectation that this is like a rent-controlled sort of situation at all, right? Just to be clear. Yes.
Are
Yeah,
they free
it's
market?
not required under the ordinance.
Yeah.
And it does lead to the density issue of this whole project. And so, yeah, you say it's not related, but I do say it's related. So we'll agree to disagree on that one, but I think it's a valid question for this whole project. But anyway, all right, I'm done. Do we lead to discussion now? Is mine?
Are there any more questions from commissioners?
This is a question for Stephanie. Was there any Norway maple, did you say, down there below? And the follow-up to that is whether or not you guys would be leaving the Norway maple. We always seem to go back and forth with applicants on this one.
Yeah, I think in terms of if we were prioritizing species, that would not be a high priority for removal.
Okay.
There were a couple down there, Norway and sugar maple.
Okay, thanks. So, again, I don't know if we need a discussion about the city versus the applicant, the long-term.
Right. I brought that up. Now I'm thinking maybe that's something along with the discussion on the community space that we can talk, you can talk with staff and maybe we can meet on that.
Yeah,
further.
I think the maintenance of these community spaces, typically that gets worked out with the community space agreement post-approval.
Great. Then we can definitely talk about that
Yeah.
in the future.
Any other questions? Is there anyone here from the public that wants to, I know I see a lot of people in the crowd, wants to speak about this application? No? Okay. Are we ready to make a motion? It's a little bit of a long one.
Yeah.
Someone
I
can
got a
just start and we
list here.
can
Okay.
chime in with whatever stipulations we're missing.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to recommend for approval with the following stipulations. Here are the things that I made a note of. Including a fence to protect the 50-foot buffer, being really specific about the trail not extending into the 50-foot buffer, and that there's essentially no landscaping activity and maintenance happening within the 50-foot buffer, that there's erosion control that's used during the invasive removal process. I think that there's do we want to see an additional invasive removal and kind of monitoring plans specified in more detail?
I
think that would be helpful, at least maybe submitted to staff in our department, just maybe a seasonal report of sort of what was accomplished, what the plans are for the upcoming season, and maybe like a photo log, and just have a sense of what's been working out there, what's upcoming, when it's going to be finalized, finished.
So that?
Great.
And then there was also the salt storage, changing that language to just be a little bit more specific about no outside storage or uncovered storage of salt on site. And then I don't know if we want to say anything about the width of the path, considering a narrower path when there was potential sort of conflicts with the trees. Those are the things
If
I noted. Was there
if I
anything
could
else?
Interject for a
Yeah.
second. So while we were talking, I did remember we have the a section of notes on L100. It's community trail notes. And it actually talks about a bunch of the things we were discussing earlier. 1.2 on that says the trail width shall have a minimum width of approximately 5 feet and a maximum width of 8 feet. No instance shall soil be cut or filled to construct the trail in existing woodland restoration areas. Trail alignment shall be limited to the upland portion of land between the 50-foot and 100-foot wetland buffer, except for the central loop as depicted on the plan. There's a few other notes, I won't read them all, but I think it covers a lot of those things we had talked about previously. So.
That's great.
So,
Did you want to add, Barbara, the pavement sweeping to happen in March/April?
yeah, and
Okay.
there are a couple other ones too.
We can talk about this in discussion when we get there, but I feel firmly about keeping the trail at 5 feet. If we want to make that a stipulation, we can discuss it when we get to discussion. Did you have any other?
Stipulations come with the final vote, or do they go now just for the pre-discussion thing?
We still have a motion, so we go with the motion.
So you do go with the initial.
And then we'll
motion.
discuss, and we can, motion
You
can be
add
changed or
more
whatever.
stipulations on.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wondering.
Did you have other stipulations that we missed, Barbara?
Yeah, I can sort of second it with a stipulation. Whatever works, but, so, I think we had erosion control measures during the invasive species management to be included in the plan.
Yeah.
I think that was yours. And then sloped area gets no maintenance was to be included in the plan. That was Brian's. And then I'm wondering about the recommendations from the city too. And I don't know, I mean, I can say what they are, but I think we have number 2 is please relocate the proposed trash receptacle from 0 to 50 feet in the buffer. Please include locations of signage, public access, community space along the path, and detail specs on signs in the plan set. I wanted to add to that, no dogs on leash at all times. And I don't know what to do with number 4 under that one.
Which one's number
That's,
4?
it says, please consider removing the community space from 0 to 25 feet in the vegetated buffer.
Yeah, that
Which I
sounds
think-
like they're working with staff
To do
and
that.
TAC to-
So maybe we please work with staff to kind of remove the 25 feet. And then number 5, that's the permanent and temporary impact, so I'm not gonna, there was some pushback on that. But, I think that was it. There might be more.
Should we?
That's all I had, but did you have any?
I was just gonna say, could we add number 6, but maybe rephrase it to be, please coordinate with staff on long-term maintenance plan
Yeah.
for the
Yes.
community space?
Please.
Yeah, the idea of long-term is important for that.
Yeah. Okay, so Barbara, you seconded and added your stipulations.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, this has gotten so convoluted, but just to, that, and I think you guys had said this, is to add planning, showing where the trail's going to go for the planning board, specifically where the trail's going to go.
Yeah, it sounded like that was already a note that TAC put on there.
Yeah, just to clarify that.
Yeah. Lynn, are you okay with the stipulations that Barbara added?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Absolutely. Okay, so then we've got a motion with stipulations, seconded with a couple more motions. Discussion.
I got a lot to say.
Did you say you have a lot to say?
I have a lot to say.
Go for
They
it.
were not questions. First of all, money is a primary thing in this. They've got 30,000 square feet at least of building. They've got 75 resident, well, a few left, a little minus 75 residences, units. That's probably 150 people easily, assuming nobody has kids, or, and there are couples, but that is a lot of density right along that pond, or estuary, or whatever. That building is twice as tall as any of the other buildings. That whole plaza in there, nothing except the top of the Harbor Freight Tools is above 2 stories. Everything on the other side of the road, everything for probably a quarter of a mile down on each side, all those medical buildings, they are no more than 2 stories tall. These guys are having 4 stories. It's on the edge of the salt marsh with all of the opposite shoreline as the Urban Forestry Center. They are going to make a ton of money renting these out with these beautiful views, and they are going to be the eyesore. And they are saying they don't need to do this density. This 10% community space, they could do one building, make a lot of money off of that, and still have community space and not have it be part of the salt marsh. This is really insulting to me. And I know this is something that is common among contractors, and the engineers have taken it to a new height with their expertise and their numbers and their drawings. But basically, a subcontractor will go into a homeowner and say, yeah, all we need to do is say, yeah, we're going to take out impervious pavement, put impervious pavement. We're going to take care of the invasive species, and you're going to get whatever you want passed. And this is something that's all the contractors know, and it makes me angry. And when I see it to this extent in this kind of a project with a density that's so amazingly out whatever size for this area. The light pollution coming off of all of those 4 stories out of all those apartments is going to do damage to the wetlands. The 100-foot buffer, there should not be any trails through a 100-foot buffer, in my opinion. I know that might not be the law or whatever, but the CUPs are, I think they were initially invented because somebody who maybe had land and didn't, might have been gone generations through a family or something, and they wanted to do an addition, that they were allowed to do it. But it seems like the CUPs for Portsmouth are just like, sure, the law, it's 100 set foot back. Oh, that's not really necessary. Just give us something and we'll give it to you back. And it just makes me angrier and angrier. And when I see a project like this where they are seriously, 75 units in this little space, it's obviously just a profit-driven thing. So anyway, that's pretty much, that pretty much covers it. So there we are. Yeah. Sorry. And you're lucky because you didn't get any direct hits from my topic.
I just wanted to know, Abby, I really appreciate your concern and your opinions there. I just wanted to make sure that we know that this is a development in the Gateway District, and the amount of stories, 4 stories, is allowed, and they have met setbacks and all those zoning requirements. So.
Oh, yeah, I know it's allowed, but then they're using the community they're using these sort of little enticements or bait and switches, and this is, yeah, they pointed out, oh, yeah, we're not in the buffer zone, we're not in the buffer zone, but they're using the buffer zone to their economic gain, and there is no, having a path through it and having the lights that close to it, there's no respect for the buffer zone. They're just using it. They know this is how the mechanism in which they need to get things passed. And yes, that's cynical, but I think it's probably pretty accurate for a lot of the building that goes on. And not to mention the architectural, this does not do anything to blend in. This is going to be something that catches the eye no matter where you are in the Urban Forestry Center or anywhere else. So their architecture doesn't even make the choice to blend in and become a part of the wetlands. It's blatantly bright, looks like it's ADD. There's nothing calming about it. Anyway. All right, I'll shut up.
Your commentary is valid, and there's parts of it that I don't disagree with. And I think there's a lot of part of it that, unfortunately, it's like at a higher level that things need to change, that then allows us to enforce that change, I guess.
But there was a project where they wanted the driveway to go through the buffer zone. It was an old dilapidated tar driveway, and they wanted to build the 2 lots. They needed a new driveway to get in. And their argument was, oh, well, we're going to improve the septic and things like that. Well, you put new asphalt down on anything. Nature was biodegrading the other. They put in new asphalt. And we do have, that is in our control. So it's not as if, those are bigger questions, but we do have some controls over these because they do affect the wetlands. So, anyway.
Yep.
I'm going out with a bang.
I also struggle with the idea of that so-called community space that nobody else will access. Yes, there are 12 additional parking spaces, and you can put as many bicycle racks there, but as soon as that happens, residents will complain that there are people that don't live there that are using the gardens, and when you have the residents there, their friends will be there, those parking spaces will not be available, and so nobody else apart from the residents will be able to access that so-called community space, and I struggle with that.
It's not necessarily like a walkable, we're not close to downtown here where it's walkable for anyone that's parking in that vicinity. I struggle with that too.
I think one thing to consider there is kind of how this might in the future fit into a larger kind of system in that particular area. I know there are more residents going in even further down Route 1 that are, probably within a half a mile or so up here. They would probably be more likely to use this kind of space. I think there are people that probably would benefit from having a nice trail there. They may use the Urban Forestry Center as well, but the trail to get down there is kind of a steep little embankment, so access from that side of the road is a little difficult. So I think there are some benefits here. I don't think it's completely closed off to everybody. And if you think about it as a larger kind of, in the future, it may help lead to a larger network that connects elsewhere that could provide some benefit. So.
Yeah. I would also love, we talked about that, but love seeing it opening up to that connecting shopping center that I think would also in the future maybe lead to that shopping center becoming, all more of like a connected plan for pedestrian traffic and, I don't know, just maybe more of a revitalization of that area. I know that's not part of this application, the opening up, but I'd like to put that out there, for when it goes to planning board and.
Yeah.
So I have a question on that one a little bit. I don't know if it's for Kate or Peter or whatever, but if I'm feeling pretty strongly about the community access kind of part of this, but it's not part of our purview really, because TAC is the one that's deciding on that.
Right, so in our staff memo, we sort of gave this as a recommendation because it's the community space easement and where it goes is not in the Conservation Commission's purview, but it's in TAC and eventually Planning Board's purview. But I think TAC is very open to our suggestions and where we want sort of the conservation land to be and if we want it untouched. So I think they're very open to what we recommend. And
Because I mean, I think part of it is if it is determined that, you know, portion of where this trail is cannot be counted community space, do we even want the trail there at all?
Yeah, that's always been my thought. It's a little bit like the ones that benefit from it, if it's not community space, are the people that are at that property.
So it's kind of like the community space we need that to be fully defined to know, to feel confident in where that trail's going, what's going through there, I guess. I'm not
Yeah, it's not.
articulating it well, but.
It looked like the staff report was recommending, you know, that the 0 to 25-foot buffer was not included in community space. I mean, I think we could extend that. Like, let's make the recommendation that 0 to 50 is like not allowed to be considered community space when they're calculating, you know, the building footprint and everything else about the development.
But then would you still, like, would the trails still be, like, what would happen to this application if that ended up being the 0 to 50 is not counted as community space? I would think they wouldn't want to put the trail in.
Well, at least as it's, I
And
mean,
so now,
it may not actually affect it all that much, because the trail is, it sounds like upland of
oh
the
yeah,
50-foot line.
yeah, that's true.
But it, just for like the calculation, as well as
Yeah.
for the, you know, precedent for future projects.
For future, yeah.
We got Peter.
Not now.
Yeah.
Hi, can I make a comment?
Yes.
Okay, so Peter Britz, Director of Planning and Sustainability. So you guys are talking a lot about the community space. It's a requirement in this zone that they have to provide 10% community space for this site, which they're trying to do. I think your input is really valuable on the community space. I think the input, it sounds like what you need to advise the planning board is you want the public access to be clearly marked, if that's where you're going with that. In terms of your ability to approve or recommend on the community space, it's really not, that's not your purview. It's more the 100-foot buffer and the impact in the buffer. If you think the community space is going to have too great an impact in the buffer, that is your purview. If you think the community space is going to be a benefit to the buffer or neutral, those kind of things are useful. I think, you know, we put the community space recommendation in there because we were aware that it could change. There's some concerns that 25-foot at least isn't regulated, but there's different types of community space, and this falls into a green space, community space that allows public access through it. So they'll probably have some back and forth with staff to make sure they get a plan that works with the planning board, and the planning board ultimately have to approve what they describe as being 10% of the space on the site being community space. But I think the concerns about making sure the public can get through there would be, you know, important to express to the planning board, and about how it's maintained in the future, whether the trail can meander or what the size of the trail, that kind of thing, are all valid because those are impacts of the 100-foot buffer. So I think if you can just try and limit it to the impacts of the 100-foot buffer, that's really what the planning board is going to be looking for in their analysis. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm still a tiny bit confused then, because your staff report did include this recommendation of excluding the 0 to 25 from the community space calculation. So I guess why can't we broaden that?
You could recommend that they broaden it,
Okay.
but the reason we recommended that was because it fits the definition of parks. The 25 doesn't. So we're deciding what the definition of community space is. That's different than what goes on in the 100-foot buffer. So it's really not your purview to say how wide it can be. It's more about how we're trying to work with them to come up with the right community space definition. And it seems to us it works to go to the 20, not to go past the 25, because nobody in the city can go past the 25 because it's a no-cut, it's a no-disturbance buffer. The 25 to 100 is areas where work can be done in the buffer, and they're putting a trail in. If you think the trail isn't appropriate there, that's a different matter. But I think I would try to stick not to the community space, but to the impact in the buffer, and how there's too much of an impact in the buffer the way they're doing the community space. That's totally appropriate. But I don't think it's really going to be helpful to the planning board for you to say it's, you know, it's going to be too many cooks basically to everybody trying to decide what the community space width is. But the buffer is where we're, you know, where your comments are going to be important and looked at.
Okay. And just while we have you, Peter, Could you give us an example of what community space has looked like for other projects when you think it's been done well? Is it actually meant to be public, or is it just meant to
Yeah.
be like?
Community space turns into an easement that the public gets to travel over. Different community spaces have different types, so there's, pocket parks, there's, I don't have all there's like 10 in the zoning ordinance that I can't name all of them off the top of my head, but they're meant to be places where either the community can congregate, it's set aside as just park, it's a greenway where you can walk through it. So there's a whole different bunch of types. This community space is a requirement of this zone. In some zones, even in this zone, they could provide more community space and get incentives to do more density or other things on the lot, but they're not doing that. They're just doing the required amount of community space. And they mentioned it, and I think it's important to note that the nature of the lot here is that a huge amount of the lot is in salt marsh. So their amount of community space they're providing, if it was a lot that didn't have that wetland or salt marsh in the lot, they would have a much smaller amount of community space. So it looks like a lot more compared to the development than a typical development would usually see. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't design it well and meet all the requirements. I'm just pointing that out.
Well, I don't think the salt marsh is being considered as part of the 10%.
The salt marsh is part of the lot area, and that's part of the 10%. They have to use that in their calculation of the 10%. So, and that's a pretty big area. Any other questions for me? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we want to add kind of a stipulation, or I don't know if this is maybe a letter to the planning board saying that we need them to allow for like better public access than kind of what's kind of shown being provided?
It wouldn't be a stipulation, it would just be,
Like a,
because it's not really our.
I know.
What do you mean by better public, like more signage, which is something that we can stipulate
Well,
ourselves? or-
I mean, Stuart was saying like, those 12 spaces could easily be gobbled up with, residents having people over, and then not necessarily wanting to see people in their backyard. Yeah, so I think signage is one, but also just access in terms of people being able to get there if they're not walking and they need a place to park.
Then I would say that you're right, that a letter would be probably the best way to address that.
Okay. All right.
I think that's it. I mean, referring to what Peter just said, we've put a certain number of stipulations about the impact on the buffer. I'm happy with those. And if we want to add something, it's got to be outside of that, and it can be a letter to the Planning Commission about what we've just discussed.
Yeah, with accessibility and,
Yeah.
yeah. How do people feel about that? Are we ready for a vote? Is there anything else anyone needs to talk through more?
I was just going to say, as far as the trail goes, it's really hard with these trails, because you see later on when people are using them a lot, that no matter what you do, they cause a huge impact to the buffer. It's a sensitive area, and people do have dogs and let their dogs go down to the water and cause erosion. But it does kind of sound like you guys are trying to make an effort to mitigate some of those impacts. And I definitely would be in favor of the city being the one for the long-term maintenance, if there's that possibility, or the resources or capacity to do that. I think that's huge for the city to take it on, but, or at least have a negotiable kind of maintenance program, so that.
Yeah, if they're making money off of this thing and they're, I think there's an obligation that they sort of upkeep their own, not throw it into the city. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I don't know how these have typically worked.
I don't know how it would
That's-
work either.
I mean,
City oversight, maybe.
Yeah, the city oversight, yeah.
Yeah.
the engineers, ecologists, and planners that are here are employed to do that. It's not them that are basically doing money, and I want to assume they're doing this with the best intentions, as I can see, or we can see, hopefully, through their work. The fact that somebody's making a lot of money out of that is a different discussion that I'm generally aligned with you, but it's not in our purview to discuss that.
No, but it might affect who oversees it. I mean, you don't want to create a lot of situations where the taxpayers of Portsmouth are paying for something that is, you know,
Yeah.
is the property of somebody else and should be held responsible for the property.
city staff.
Because they would be getting this permission to do this under the
And I think,
agreement that they
yeah,
would be-
and that's an agreement, it sounds like is worked out between city
Okay.
staff and the, yeah, but definitely something that, to voice so that it's part of that agreement. Did we have, was one of the stipulations the trail width being 5 feet, did that get in there?
I think so, yep.
Okay, are
would-
people,
I would just say on something like that, when we say 5 feet, what does 5 feet mean, plus or minus? So, you know, typically
Yeah.
we'd say like a minimum of 5 feet. I'd say maybe if we say 5 to 6 feet or something like
Yeah.
that. So we kind of are
Yep.
minimizing the width, but, you know, 5 feet
wiggle room?
is,
Yeah,
yeah, so.
I'm fine with that.
Sure.
So 5 to 6 feet.
Is that in the motion? You have to, you're okay with that in the motion, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, right now it sounds like it reads 5 to 8 feet, but we want it to read 5 to 6 feet, does it work? So.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think to make a note,
Thanks.
thank you
Thank you.
for the planning board letter about the accessibility thing. It's just really,
That'll,
not really,
this condition, but
well, yeah, not as a separate thing from the conditions.
part of the
but
list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, I believe, is wetland conditional use permit for 60 Pleasant Point Drive. Can't get to my top of my application, but, is that right?
Are you having problems with the thing
Yeah,
coming down
yeah.
with the bookmarks? Yeah, okay.
So go
Ready?
ahead, whenever you're ready.
For the record, Eric Weinrib with Altus Engineering. And I'm going to be brief. I'm a little frustrated because I was supposed to be at my son's high school award banquet for his fall sport at 5, so I'm going
Sorry.
to be brief and try to be patient. I do want to thank Allison, although she's not here, for her many years of service, and although we butted heads many, many times, I always valued her input, and she'll be sorely missed with your commission. I have with me tonight Michelle and John Morris, also Ben, the owners, Ben Auger and Andrew Wilson with Auger Building Company, Johanna Carnes and Devin Heffern with Matthew Cunningham, and their subconsultant Miles Connors with Parterre Ecological. We were before you last summer, and we had a site walk as well. And at that site walk and the and the meeting, we came away that I think you liked the project in general, but there were things that you wanted us to change. We took those changes to heart. We've reduced the site impervious. We've added more permeable surfaces. We added a dry well on the front side and the parking lot side to promote infiltration. And I think most importantly, we worked hard regrading the site to preserve the silver maple along the property line adjacent to the McSherry, which is proof is the handout I just gave you as a letter from the McSherry voicing their support for the project. 2020, the Morrises bought the property shortly after they permitted and built a new dock for the property. We've done an extensive background work. We did wetlands mapping. We've done existing conditions survey. We've met with DEF on a pre-application process to get their inputs on the restoration and the invasive species eradication. We had Mike Como prepare a functions and values assessment of the wetland buffer, which is in your packet. It's been a long 2 years getting to this point. The Morses have invested a lot of energy into the design process, balancing their objective of having a new home and protecting and enhancing the wetland buffer. We had many design constraints on the site. It's a narrow lot. It's got an odd shape with a short frontage, and it comes up in grade significantly. So the building envelope is very challenging and limited. They have a large driveway that's on the site that was built before there was any considerations for stormwater management. And in places, the lawn now goes up to the steep bank. There's invasives all over the property. What we're doing, see on this plan, is that we're reducing the impervious in the 100-foot buffer by 31 square feet. But more importantly, in the 0 to 50 buffer, we're taking 623 square feet out. We're eliminating the invasives. We're treating the whole lot, although a significant portion of the lot is in the 100-foot buffer. It's really all very close to the resource area, and we're treating this site in a holistic manner. We're looking at the overall effective impervious, the overall stormwater management, and landscaping in the entire site. And I'm going to turn it over to Devin in a few moments. I'm not going to go through the criteria for the conditional use permit. You have it in your packet. And Devin can speak to the other items. I think that it's a well thought out process. We have not applied to DES for shoreland permit. We have not applied to the wetlands permit yet. So we'll be back before you for the wetland permit. We didn't want to make that application until we got you guys to buy in. If you buy in, then we'll go and finish up those 2 permit applications. In regards to the staff recommendations, I just want clarification that the permanent markers you're looking for are the 25-foot no-cut buffer and not 50 or 100. We'll be in the middle of the house. We can talk about the frequency of the invasive species management reports, as well as Devin's going to speak about the pool information. I'm going to let it run from here. Devin?
Good evening. My name is Devin Heffron. I'm with Matthew Cunningham Landscape Design, and as Eric said, we're the landscape architects on the project. If we could, can I change the slides here, or do you guys need to do it for me?
Tell Kate.
Just go to the landscape plan, master plan, please, the color plan. Thank you.
Hope it doesn't freeze on the way there.
So I know Eric kind of hit on some of these things, but just a quick overview of the property and then some of the proposed changes. So it's a 1958 ranch. You guys have been there. It's in fair condition. It does have a really wide existing driveway and a large kind of overflow parking area in front of the garage door bays. That area is really visible from Pleasant Point Drive as you're walking or driving along. The existing lawn areas are expansive, as Eric mentioned, and often encroach into the 25-foot buffer. The plantings around the house that are existing right now are fairly sparse and ornamental, including things like hydrangea, azalea, lilies, hosta, and ornamental grasses. There's an existing dock and 2 existing wood stairs down the bank. And as Eric mentioned, the coastal bank is infested with invasive species, including bittersweet barberry, buckthorn, and multiflora rose. That bank is also eroded and failed in several areas. On the proposal, obviously it's a shingle-style house that's been shifted away from that coastal bank. We're planning on changing the driveway approach to allow for more screening between the roadway itself and the house, which is a benefit obviously to the homeowners for privacy, but also we think it's a benefit to the neighborhood to be looking at more vegetation than architecture. We have worked with, as Eric mentioned, we've worked with the abutters to the north to create a vegetated buffer that will provide some privacy via perennials and shrub material without blocking any of their views or blocking light into their windows, hence the letter that you guys have received. We're also cognizant of maintaining some sight lines from the roadway out to the water that exist right now, which is also a concern that we heard. Parterre Ecological has provided you guys with a land management plan, which includes plans to eradicate invasive species and revegetate the bank with native plants. In that process, those eroded areas of the bank will be stabilized using biodegradable products that won't leave any long-term impact on the resource area. As you can see, the swimming pool's been relocated and reshaped to allow for the Morrises, the homeowners, to use it for exercise as they plan to age in place at this new home. The proposed pool and spa are also going to be low chemical, primarily relying on UV light for sanitizing. So no more heavy chlorine pool in the buffer. All areas of lawn will be microclover fescue sod, which I think most of you are familiar with at this point, but that product doesn't require any fertilizer because the clover fixes the nitrogen that the fescue grass needs, and it requires far less water, and so therefore is a more ecologically sensitive solution than typical turf grass. So in summary, we think that the proposed landscape plan and the home siting will fit well into the context of the neighborhood. And while building the dream home for the Morrises, they are very committed to being good stewards of the land. So as Eric mentioned, the overall concept is a holistic approach of looking at the site. There's a large amount of plant material that's proposed to go back in here so that it feels well knitted into to that neighborhood. And then if we're approved, we feel that this proposed plan will deliver a beautiful new home and better biodiversity for the site, and will give the Morrises all the programmatic goals that they're aiming for. And lastly, Eric mentioned that Miles Connors is here from Parterre Ecological, and he can answer any questions related specifically to the invasive management plan and the land management plan. So he's a resource if you guys have any questions for him. But in the meantime, I'm happy to answer any questions related to the landscape plan.
Anyone with landscape plan questions before?
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure if it's landscaping plan or whatever, and you may have said it, I apologize. Tree cutting on the other side of the house?
Yes.
Behind the house?
It's on the other side of the house.
So which trees will be cut down again?
So there are two smaller ornamental trees, like Japanese maple type scale, and then there's two silver maples along the driveway.
And the silver maples have to go?
They do, yeah.
And why is that?
So the part of the goal of the siting of the new house and the new driveway is to gain elevation so that the new owners are coming in at the living quarter level of the house, the first floor level, rather than coming in through the basement and having to go upstairs. And that's twofold. One is we think that it creates a better interaction between the landform that's there and the house itself, meaning the whole house sits against the land rather than sitting up high above it. And it also allows, like I said, they plan to be in this home for the duration, so it makes it so that they don't have to traverse lots of stairs to get from their cars up to the living spaces. So, sorry, to be more direct with your question. So, in order to make that elevation change, we need to create a slightly more circuitous driveway in order to climb up and not have a very steep drive. So that we're using that more winding drive as a way to solve the grading problem, but it also gives us an opportunity to use the plantings to buffer the house from the road.
Thank you. And
Yep.
just in the planting plan, there's going to be a couple of big trees?
Yes, there will be.
replanted?
There will be. Yeah. So,
I can't remember.
great question. So this plan, so the plan is to remove those 4 trees. 2 of them are significant size. The proposed landscape plan has over 30 trees proposed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah.
I just have a curiosity about mowing,
Yep.
just in general, because my understanding is that 2 of the benefits of the microclover and the fescue are that they can go longer periods without needing to be mowed, or essentially not mowed. Is that, and I may have missed it if you put it in here, but has that been considered by the homeowner, or what's the plan about that piece?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. No, so we haven't discussed specifically mowing schedules. You're right about that product can go longer without mowing, but it really is an aesthetic. It comes down to an aesthetic thing in the end, like whether or not, some people want the more tightly manicured lawn than others. I've seen it where people will mow the away from the edges more tightly and regularly, and then, closer to like the perennial edges, they'll let it get a little bit taller and then mow it less frequently. But it really comes down to kind of a personal preference. But it is like, we're using it on, I'd say, the bulk of our projects now, because it's such, we all know turf grass is a terrible thing for the environment. So anywhere where we're able to use this product, we are using it. It's a great solution, specifically related to the lack of fertilizer.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other landscape plan-related questions? I think that might be it for landscape. I have a question, non-landscape plan related. It looks like there's going to be underground electric utilities heading down to the dock. Is that new part of this plan? And I was just curious what the illumination of the dock, or what's coming from that, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty typical to have a seasonal water service so you can spray off the boat and so forth. So that's going to be water service going to the dock, as well as power so they can, have lighting on the dock, or just to charge a battery or something down there. So it's not for a structure or anything. It's just that seasonal use.
Yeah, I think we would just want to make sure that it's, not, the light isn't on all the time at night. It's just when they're
Yeah.
using it and then it's turned off,
I think they want to enjoy the dark as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that would be the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Any other?
Yeah, on the maintenance plan that you have, it
Yep.
seems like not really connected with this project necessarily. I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's not specifics to, I mean, are there things within the landscape that you wanted to address where, none of the buffer would be cut and things like that at all with that? I mean,
So if I'm understanding your question, so you're talking about the land management plan and specifics related to how that area will be maintained over time?
yes, thank you.
So I can have Miles speak to that, but my general thinking on that area is that the Morris's preference is to establish a native planted area that doesn't require all the things you guys were just talking about on the previous, like it doesn't require mulching, doesn't require regular maintenance. They're committed to maintaining their property rights. So if there's erosion, they're going to end up repairing it because they want to protect their property. So that means replacing any plant material that's lost, because obviously the plant material is also doing a huge value by the roots stabilizing the bank. So there's a benefit there. I think they would be working to keep any large woody material out of there, but obviously keeping all the kind of the more ornamental natives that they've planted to enjoy all the, that the habitat that it's creating, and then, you know, all the fall color and summer flowers and all of that. Miles, I don't know if you have anything else that you can add to
So,
maintenance.
go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Miles Connors with Parterre Ecological. I just wanted to add that in the land management plan, we actually have a maintenance and monitoring plan associated with the 3-year order of conditions. You know, often these areas obviously are wild. You do have regeneration of invasive plant species that come in. So in the process of coming in and doing that management, whether it's hand pulling and cutting and removal, you will have regeneration. So there is a long-term maintenance and monitoring plan as part of the land management plan.
Okay, it'd be great to like include that in for the homeowners to pass on to other homeowners or whatever when they, so, yeah. I mean, just because you're going to create something awesome, and it'd be nice if the next people come in, don't cut it all down, and
Yeah, sure.
even though they're not supposed to.
Yep. Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
My, maybe you guys can answer. My iPad is freezing up constantly. But I don't remember, I know it's a 2-story, it says it on that.
Mm-hmm.
There is no elevation drawing in here, is there? Or
No,
is
there's
there?
not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a shingle style home. You know, it's nothing, you know, super modern. I mean, I'm not an architect, but I feel like it's pretty in keeping with the type of home you'd see in that part of Portsmouth or Kittery Point. You know, it's a beautiful home that they've designed.
Is it going to be any higher than today?
I don't know offhand. Do you guys happen to know the height of the building?
Yeah, it's a 1-story home today.
Right.
Okay, so the next story.
So yes, and as we mentioned before, so right now it's a single story, but you get that feeling of 2-story because of the bizarre land form in the front of the house.
But on the ocean side, you know, with the
Yes.
2-story.
It will be
it'll
taller. Yes,
be
correct. Yep.
Significantly, yeah. Okay. You said sort of not modern, traditional?
Yes.
Okay.
Traditional
So-
shingle style. Yep.
Shingle style roof?
Yep.
Gables or? I
Shingle
mean,
roof. What's the?
Yeah,
Sorry.
and actually, the second story is within the roof line.
Yeah, okay.
So the second story is the roof.
Yeah.
Yep.
So got gables and dormers, okay.
Any other questions? Is everyone in the audience, is anyone here to speak to this, or are you guys all just supportive? Are you here to speak? If we have no more questions, you may come up and.
Hello, I'm Chris Brown, 45 Pleasant Point Drive, which is directly across the street from this project. And street views from Pleasant Point were alluded to. I think it was my kind of issue that came up last time about the landscape plan kind of shutting off a view that I had of the water, and I wasn't happy about that. We're taxed on water views on Pleasant Point, and I certainly want to keep the water views I had. And I was pleasantly relieved to see the new planting plan that seems to take into account some of those issues that I had with losing water views because of planting of pine trees and spruce and so forth that grow very tall and very wide. Interesting note is that this neighborhood was designed for houses on the non-water side to look between houses on the water side. And that was a long time ago in the 60s, but I think it's worth noting for this area and other areas of Portsmouth that long ago some of the house layouts took into account the viewscapes, and they are worth money and they're worth preserving. And I was gratified to see that the Morrises took input that my wife and I had about the view situation and made some positive changes. So regarding the project as a whole, I think it's a net gain for the neighborhood. The house that's there now is dated and needing to be updated. And you know, as a, not a direct abutter, but across the street abutter, I'd be happy to see a beautiful new structure on that lot. That's it.
Great, thank you. Okay, yeah,
I have to leave within like 2 minutes to go get my kids, so
okay.
vote or leave.
Yeah, are we ready for a motion?
Couple just quick points. If that's okay. Sorry. Well, Eric brought it up, and I want to make sure he can get out of here soon. But for the wetland boundary markers, those are, they say no disturb, no cut. So
Yeah.
that would be along the 25-foot buffer. I know Eric was worried about that. And they addressed the pool stipulation that I had. So I think in terms of my stipulation, I'm satisfied with that. I don't know about you all. But then also, if we are considering stipulations, I think we briefly talked about the maintenance plan for invasive species removal and restabilizing the bank. And so that's a month-to-month plan, it looks like. So I think we in the planning department would be appreciative if we could get that monthly update or report on what's been going on with photo logs and just a report back on the success. That's my piece.
So just one quick thing on that. I know we're happy to do that because Parterre will be providing that for the Morrises anyway. But just to note that obviously it's not something that will go on year round. So it'll only be during the months where it's active that you would get an update. Yep.
Yep, I think that's all we're looking for.
Okay.
Sorry, Stuart.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval for 60 Pleasant Point Drive with the stipulations that the wetland boundary markers indicate the 25-foot buffer at certain intervals.
I'm not sure if you want to specify that.
Okay, just that okay. And that the maintenance plan include monthly updates during work.
During construction,
invasive species to the
during
city.
invasive removal and then the replanting process.
Thank you.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion?
Oh, we got
We already got a second,
Okay,
but
sorry.
I
Busy actually looking at my
appreciate all
iPad
the,
because it's moving.
the landscape, I don't know, vegetation that was put into this and the micro clover lawn. I think you're doing a good job being a steward to this property, in my opinion. Are we ready for a vote? All in favor? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Almost 5:30. Good timing.
A little bit, right? Are we not doing the overpass thing? It's not on the agenda today, but it was on the agenda before.
Sorry, that was confusingly labeled. That's just DES correspondence, but it wasn't labeled DES correspondence. So it's just thrown in the packet just for our reading, just to be aware of the project. But it's not an application.
Is our other business fairly quick? Do you
Yeah.
need to like make a motion for another, to extend? I think just.
Do you want to talk about the meantime?
Yeah.
So it might take a few
Can we
minutes.
start that? You want to make a motion to extend another 15?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to extend the meeting another 15 minutes beyond our 5:30 deadline.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Great. Do you want me to start with?
Oh,
the
sorry.
time? Do you want to start?
I'm putting it down.
You wanna
So I can just start quickly with mine and get it
Yeah.
out of the way.
Yeah.
Next week, I already talked about this, and I'm sorry if I'm being a dead horse, but next Wednesday, 3:30 to about 5:30, Anna Boudreau is going to give us a quick presentation on Dover's Open Lands Committee and how they're doing conservation land practices and easements. So it'll be about 45 minutes of presentation, 30, 45, and then whatever time is left over for our Q&A. And if we want more info from her or would like to see a second presentation, it'll also be recorded. So for those who cannot make it, we'll be able to send it to them for review. But that's my piece.
Is that in here?
Yes. Yep. So like Sybil, same regular meeting time, 3:35 next Wednesday.
Is that all you had?
That's all I have. Sorry.
We want to bring up again the possibility of maybe adjusting our meeting time, potentially to just starting a half hour later. We're not voting on it or anything today, but just something to think about. If that would, I've heard from some commissioners that even just a half hour later start time would help some people get here a little bit easier. So starting at 4 p.m. and then instead of maybe, you know, how we have to vote at 5:30 to extend, it would then be a 6 p.m. to extend. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that initially. It's something I think that also would need to be confirmed that's allowed and what the mechanism is if we do want to change the time and how we do that. But I'm just curious what people think about that. It'd be the same day as of right now, same.
That would clearly be helpful for me. I apologize for being late, but yeah, just that extra half hour to get things sorted out and get here with childcare and various pieces of after-school stuff would be hugely helpful for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's also helpful for me, just, I know we have that 5:30 stop, but it's sort of been vague, so just knowing roughly like 4 to 6 is kind of our time, and then
Yep.
maybe
If we're close, we try
Yeah.
to, yeah, in terms of the childcare piece, yeah, I
Yeah.
understand. Definitive, yeah, time. Is anyone like severely opposed to it, or, okay, all right.
I like it better too.
Okay. I will, I mean, I'd like to hear what Stuart has to
Yeah.
say about it too.
I know, because he has to.
And Brian, because Brian's not here. So maybe we send an email out to them and just get their thoughts and then figure out maybe what the
Right, so if,
next
I mean,
steps are.
if Brian and Stuart aren't opposed to it, then maybe we can start talking to legal and see how we can work that into the rules for the commission.
Yeah.
And then
And whether or not it's impacts next meeting or not, I don't know.
you made it, will
Like it
be
would have to be December,
the
or
new
it
year?
would have to be Jan, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but
All right.
I'm sure we'll figure that
I
out.
just wanted to
soon.
bring that up. That's all I have.
All right.
So, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Thank
Okay.
you.